Hello and welcome to Russ's Movie Corner. As you can see, I'm in front of my movie wall, and today I'm going to do an entire retrospective on Mission Impossible. So I will start with the first film and kind of work all the way through until Rogue Nation, and then I will cap it off with a review of Mission Impossible Fallout, which I will go and see after making this video. So, back in 1966, a little-known TV series came out called Mission Impossible. Okay, now Mission Impossible was one of the first truly interesting TV series because it wasn't your typical go get the bad guy show that was out in 1966. It actually had a lot of different people. It starred Leonard Nimoy. It had Martin Landau, Peter Graves. There was a lot of different people in this series, and it really did a different take on kind of the spy genre. And at this point, there had been only 4 Bond films. Okay, Bond premiered in 1962 with Dr. No. So if you count, that's actually Dr. No, okay, that's Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, and Thunderball, okay, so at that point, and then You Only Live Twice was kind of coming out at that time, so at that point, there was really only one spy out there, and that was James Bond, and he was a one-man army. He basically went in and kind of, beat the bad guys and got the girl and, all that kind of stuff. Mission Impossible did it a little differently, because Mission Impossible wasn't your typical, show. It was, they had a mission. Your mission, Jim, should you choose to accept it. And the guy would, accept the mission, because otherwise there would be no TV show if he didn't accept the mission. So he'd accept the mission, and then he'd sit down and he would actually, they would plan out what they were going to do. And they'd come up with these harebrained schemes, and then they have a guy, usually played by either Leonard Nimoy or Martin Landau, and those guys would be the face man. Okay, so they would actually put a mask over their face, and they'd be running along, impersonating people and doing things, and they're like, wait a minute, there's something a little off about that guy, but it's like usually they were spot on. So that's one of the setups for this, and that show ran for quite a long time, and it was very popular. So, like a lot of things, okay, as happens in Hollywood, they wanted to come out with reboots. Now, there was a thing that happened in the middle 90s, and for a lot of people, and you probably don't know about this, okay, but for those of you that did not grow up in the 80s and the 70s, okay, if you grew up, like you were a kid in the 90s and then you got into the 2000s, there was a period called the Cold War. The show Mission Impossible, the original show, was set during the Cold War. So a lot of it dealt with Russia and Soviet bloc countries like Poland and Czechoslovakia, and spies that would come over from Russia, and there were KGB agents, and they were sent to try to, destabilize a country over here, or, bolster a revolution over here, or something like that. And then the Mission Impossible people, the Impossible Mission Force, if you will, the IMF, they would go in and fight these people. Well, in 1989, the Berlin Wall, which separated the East and the West on the map, okay, which was basically divided Europe in half, okay, and on the one side, the USSR kind of controlled that area, okay, and that was the eastern half, and then the western half, all of the countries pretty much were the same, and they were called NATO. And so here's the thing, okay, with this thing, when the Berlin Wall fell, the Soviet Union dissolved. So now there were all these little countries everywhere, okay? There's Ukraine and Kyrgyzstan and Dagestan and, all these little republics, and Uzbekistan and Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania and all these little countries that used to be part of one major country, the Soviet Union, is now gone. So, in the middle 90s, and they did this with Bond, they did this with like every major spy franchise, and Mission Impossible was no different. So, this was kind of a torch passing, changing of the guard movie because Bond did it with GoldenEye. Okay? So that was sort of their take on the whole, hey, the Cold War's ended, yay. Well, that's kind of how everybody kind of dealt with this stuff. It was, they'd have this movie. Okay, so this was directed by Brian De Palma, and it was written by David Koepp and Robert Towne. And Robert Towne, will hear his name again. And so what it was basically the character from the original Mission Impossible, okay, Jim Phelps, played by Peter Graves in the original. He's played by Jon Voight in this film. As you can tell, Tom Cruise was kind of the major draw, because at that time in his career, he had blown up, like, Risky Business was kind of his breakthrough hit. And then he had Top Gun, and then he had Days of Thunder, and then he had a bunch of other films. So this kind of was sort of his franchise movie. Like, Paramount was thinking, well, they took Pierce Brosnan with the Bond series, which you can kind of see right there. They took Pierce Brosnan with the Bond series, and they kind of shoved him out there, and they were like, see, we've got this guy, because we have this franchise. So they kind of looked around and they said, well, we can do a TV series, but why don't we do a movie and see how it works? And if it works, then we can talk about a TV series, or we can just continue on with movies. So they came out with Mission Impossible in 1996. And the interesting thing is that going back and watching this now, at first, when I first watched this, it was kind of confusing. I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck's going on? And it took me like 3 or 4 viewings to really get the movie, to really understand the plot. And so for those of you out there that have actually seen this movie, and maybe like me, at the first time I watched it, you're like, what the heck? This movie is actually probably one of the best in the series, okay? And so, for me though, it's kind of one of my, I'll watch it every once in a while kind of movies. It's not my favorite out of the series. It's good, don't get me wrong. And it's got Henry Czerny and Kristen Scott Thomas, Vanessa Redgrave, Emmanuel Béart, Jon Voight. So it's got a really good cast. Jean Reno's in it, and he does a really good job. I always love Jean Reno. He's really good. He was one of the saving graces in the original Godzilla, or the 1998 disaster film. It is a literal disaster. But anyway, so this movie has a very unique plot, because Jim Phelps is, now that the Berlin Wall has fallen, the IMF isn't what it used to be. So now he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, the president's running the country without my permission, kind of a thing. Like, we used to run the world because we were the IMF, and we were the ones that, told people where to go and what to do. So what he wanted to do was kind of burn the IMF. He wanted to go in and kind of, steal a knock list, a non-official cover list, and then sell it to the highest bidder. Okay, played by Vanessa Redgrave and Max. And so he wants to, like, basically burn the United States, and try to tell people, it's like, hey, you want this stuff, man, you want this kind of thing, you're gonna have to pay for it, kind of a thing. And so it's that typical mid-90s, end of the Cold War, changing of the guard movie. And the stunts, just like in the rest of the Mission Impossible series, are over the top. There's like one point where Tom Cruise is famously like hanging over this floor that's pressure sensitive, and like he's all like splayed out, and he's like, like looks like a spider almost, kind kind of a thing. It's just insane. Like, some of the stuff that they do on this movie is pretty crazy. I would definitely give this one a watch. It is definitely different than your typical like Mission Impossible. But if you're a fan of like GoldenEye and those kind of mid-90s spy thrillers where people, the Peacemaker, that kind of stuff, where people were dealing with the fall of the Soviet Union and the Civil War in Bosnia and all that kind of stuff, this kind of a movie is for you. Okay? Again, it's not my favorite, and I probably give it about a 4 out of 5. Okay? It's good, it's just not my favorite. So then, a couple years afterwards, everybody was like hyped because Mission Impossible was such a great success. And so they hired on a brand new director. And they brought back Robert Towne, as a screenwriter to write a brand new Mission Impossible. And this is one of the things that I love about some of these things. They get a convoluted plot, and then they go, let's make it a little bit more simple. So, like, for instance, Star Trek. In 1997, they came out with First Contact, okay? And so the Next Generation crew was fighting the Borg, and Captain Picard's kind of all Captain Ahab about it. We gotta beat the Borg back. Then they took a step back, and they said, let's go back to what made Next Generation, okay? So they made Star Trek Insurrection. The same thing happened with GoldenEye. Like, you know, here's Bond, and he's fighting against one of his own. Then they went, you know what, let's go back and make a traditional Bond film. Tomorrow Never Dies. I love Tomorrow Never Dies. It's one of my favorite Bond films. Not, you know, it's a cheesy Bond film, but it's a great film. It's just turn your brain off at the door and walk in and just sit down and watch it. I mean, that's actually my record for the number of times I saw a movie in the theater was Tomorrow Never Dies. And so they did the same thing. They had this, you know, oh my gosh, Ethan Hunt was, you know, suspected as a mole, and, you know, he's fighting Jim Phelps and all this kind of stuff. And there were some fans of Mission Impossible that were kind of like, really? You made Jim Phelps into a bad guy? What the hell? And so they wanted to go back to what made Mission Impossible. So they went back to the formula of the TV series. We're going to have a mission. We're going to have them go in. You know, some things will go sideways, and then they'll end up triumphing in the end. And that's basic Mission Impossible. That's what made the TV series so popular. So, Mission Impossible 2. This was directed by John Woo. Okay? Yes, that John Woo. Hard-boiled, all that kind of stuff. And the action sequences in this film are probably the best you're ever going to see in the series. From here, it's like everything else is just kind of either right alongside of it or below it in terms of action. Like, this is so over the top. It is awesome. I love this film. In fact, I'd go out on a limb and say this is my absolute favorite one of the series, just because the action sequences that they do, some of the reloading and some of the different things that they show is amazing. It is, I love John Woo's camera work. He's got such an eye for action. He's crap when it comes to trying to tell a story. But when the story is there, when it's written really well, he tells it perfect. This was also Tandy Newton's first American film. Dougray Scott, actually, this was his first American film. Richard Roxburgh had done a couple of films prior to this, and he was famously in Moulin Rouge. He was the Duke in Moulin Rouge, right about the time that this came out. So there was that too. So this film is amazing, and it has Anthony Hopkins in it. Anthony Hopkins is sort of the mission giver, and when I saw that in the preview, I'm like, they got Anthony Hopkins to do a Mission Impossible movie? Yeah! That is awesome! So this one has Ethan and his team going to stop another agent of the IMF, played by Dougray Scott, from stealing a virus, okay? And there's a virus and there's a cure, okay? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to let loose the virus so that they can buy stock in a pharmaceutical company and that pharmaceutical company's stock will go through the roof because they have the cure. So they'll be like, hey, we're the only ones that have the cure. Guess what? You want the cure? You're going to have to buy it. Okay? Simple plot. Very, very simple. But the way that it's done, and Dougray Scott, and the byplay between Dougray Scott and Tom Cruise is perfect. Like, Dougray Scott plays almost like an Alec Trevelyan, like jaded, really just, like, I hated doing what I was doing, because he was a face man like Ethan Hunt, so he had to play Ethan Hunt sometimes, and so he's like, oh, I hated that, man, I hated playing you, and grinning like an idiot every 15 minutes, and he's just got this cynical attitude, and it's great. It works so well in this movie. And Tandy Newton, she's in there. Ving Rhames is perfect. And then they got a guy, I can't remember his name, plays Billy Boyd. He's just an Australian guy, really over the top, and he's just one of those kind of wild men that, that just kind of shows up in the series from time to time. And so yeah, this movie, 5 out of 5. I recommend this film. And there's a lot of people who are Mission Impossible fans that are like, this movie sucks. No, this movie's fun. Okay? Yes, it's over the top, but that's what makes it awesome. So give this one a try. If you've never seen it before, give it a go. Have fun. See it. It's a great film. Tom Cruise does a really good job in that film. And contrary to a lot of the Bond films at that time, he actually gets his butt kicked in the movie a fair few times. He has to run away from some fights. He's getting overwhelmed. It's not your typical, like, James Bond spy thriller. Even though they tried to make it that kind of a thing. So, yeah, give it a look. Give it a second chance. Now, the next one, they decided to get rid of Robert Towne, and they decided to go in a bit of a different direction with the character of Ethan Hunt. So they went to the writing team of Roberto Orci, Alex Kurtzman, and J.J. Abrams to make Mission Impossible 3. Now, one of the things was that when this movie came out, Tom Cruise was kind of miffed because he told them that he didn't want to use numerics. He did not want to have it like MI3 or Mission Impossible 3. He did not want to have Mission Impossible 2. He wanted to have subtitles. The problem was they didn't do that. And so he kind of was like, seriously guys, we got to get rid of the numerics, okay? It's kind of boring. Everybody knows. It's like, he's like, look at the James Bond series, man. They just use movie titles. They don't use Mission Impossible 3. Okay? So, Ving Rhames is back. The newcomer, Simon Pegg, comes in. Lawrence Fishburne's in this movie. Matthew Good is in this movie, if I remember correctly. Billy Crudup, sorry, not Matthew Good. Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, Michelle Moynihan, Kerry Russell, Maggie Q. Dynamite cast, Philip Seymour Hoffman's in this movie. This movie, it took me a while to warm up to it, I'll be honest with you. Was not my favorite for a long time. I didn't even really like to watch it. It was just kind of one of those kind of films. It makes you kind of squirm a little bit in your seat. It's not a typical Mission Impossible. There are elements of Mission Impossible in it, and it's wonderful. The byplay between Jonathan Rhys-Meyers and Tom Cruise is beautiful. Ving Rhames and Tom Cruise, because they've been in 3 movies up to this point. Because Ving Rhames was in the first one. I forgot to mention that. So they've been in 3 movies. So now they're friends. Now they're like, hey, it's like, as your best friend, I need to tell you that marriages don't work out, man. And all this kind of stuff. So they try to add in an element of Tom Cruise is now trying to settle down. He's now trying to become more of a family man. He's training cadets. He's no longer out in the field. And so that's kind of the direction that they were taking the character. I think they were trying to find a new person that could possibly take over for Tom Cruise. That didn't really happen. Okay? So, the character interactions in this one are a bit different. Although Philip Seymour Hoffman, perfect villain. I love the guy as a villain. He is so good. He's one of those like Christopher Walken. You just want to reach through the screen and just strangle the hell out of him. They're so smooth and so, suave, and just, you just, God, it just grates on your nerves every time they speak. You're like, gosh, stop it, you. But yeah, it's this one. It's about a 3 or a 4 out of 5 for me. It's okay. Like I said, it took me a long time to warm up to it. That's why I say it's a 3 or a 4, maybe a 3.5 out of 5 for me. It's not the best one in the series. A lot of people will say this one's the best one. It's not. Okay, we're gonna get to the best one in a moment. Okay, so for me, this one's okay. Okay, it just has here again. They tried to go back to what made Mission Impossible Mission Impossible. After Mission Impossible 2, they were still kind of doing that whole formula of we have a mission, we're going to go get a bad guy, things go awry, and then we end up getting the bad guy in the end. The thing is, the way that they go about it is kind of different, and that's kind of what took me the longest time to warm up to, was the fact that everything was a little bit different in this film. And it just... So, in the lead up to Rogue Nation, I actually went back and watched Mission Impossible, Mission Impossible 2, Mission Impossible 3, Ghost Protocol, and then watched Rogue Nation. So, I remember it now. So, it's like, I kind of went back and was like, okay, I get it now. I kind of see it. So, the stunts in this one, they're not necessarily over the top. Not like Mission Impossible 1 or 2, or even the succeeding ones. So, this one definitely is, it's a little different. Okay? So, be warned, if you're new to the Mission Impossible franchise, this is going to be a lot different. Okay? But it's definitely going to be a new experience for a lot of people. Okay? So, give this one a look. And you know, if you do, and you come back and you're watching my videos, leave a comment and let me know what you thought of each of the Mission Impossibles. If you've seen them, if you haven't seen them, let me know what your thoughts are on each of these, because I'm letting you know what my thoughts are, and so, you know, just, I want you to know. I want to know what you think. Okay, so Mission Impossible 3 again was kind of mixed. A lot of people kind of saw it as a kind of a mixed bag. Okay, like I was just explaining. So it kind of was one of those like, so they decided, okay, we're gonna stick with Bad Robot. And at this point, J.J. Abrams was kind of off doing Star Trek, Star Wars, all that stuff. So he couldn't direct. So Paramount did one of the craziest things they've ever done. They got an animation director. Brad Bird, okay? And for those of you who know the Toy Story franchise, he's the director of the Toy Story franchise. So it was kind of interesting to see a different take on the Mission Impossible franchise. And, finally, Tom Cruise got his way. Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. This now has started the trend of having subtitles on their movies instead of numbers. So before, they were just numbering every single one of them. Now they're getting subtitles. This, in my humble opinion, is the greatest Mission Impossible film. It stars Michael Nyqvist. Gosh, there's a whole bunch of people in this one. Jeremy Renner, Simon Pegg, Paula Patton, Michael Nyqvist is in this one, Lea Seydow from Spectre. This was actually one of her, this actually I think her second Hollywood film, her first one being Inglourious Bastards. But she was kind of a minor character, so if you've ever seen Inglourious Bastards, she was actually Monsieur Lapidite's daughter in the beginning. She's the blonde-haired chick, and when you see all of them there, you'll recognize her. If you know who she is, you'll recognize her right away. Like, if you've seen Spectre or you've seen Ghost Protocol, you will know her right away. Like, you will just go, wait, that's her. Okay? And this one has, it's also got Tom Wilkinson in it, who plays the secretary. This is the first time we actually get to see the secretary. We've always heard in the Mission Impossible franchise, if you've watched any of the TV series, if you've watched any of the movies, they always have that line of, you know, if any of your IMF force is caught or killed, the secretary will disavow all knowledge. now we get to see who the secretary is, and it's played by Tom Wilkinson. And so this movie is really good. Like, it showcases, so basically the IMF gets disavowed after a bomb goes off at the Kremlin. And so now they have to try to stop the villain, played by Michael Nyqvist, who was in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the Millennium series. He's since passed away, so we won't get to see any more of his brilliance. I'm so mad that we will not be able... And he was also in John Wick. So if you've seen the original John Wick, he was the Russian, the head Russian guy in that film that John Wick kind of goes after. And so we won't be able to see any more of his brilliance. I'm so mad because it's like, oh, he had so much to offer Hollywood, and the fact that he's dead now, rest in peace. Like, after seeing this movie, I like really wanted to see him in more, because he's such a great actor, like, and he's such a good villain. That's the thing. If you watch the Swedish version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, he's very different in that, because he plays the same role as Daniel Craig. And so you're like, oh my gosh, you know, it was just crazy to think that, you know, it's like, here's this mild-mannered reporter kind of guy who's now a villain, and he's really good at it. Like, oh my gosh, is he good at it? Like, raw, you know, just like crazy villain. Again, the stunts in this movie, like, Tom Cruise actually hangs off the side of the Burj Khalifa. Now, for those of you that don't know, the Burj Khalifa is the tallest hotel in the world. Okay? So just go look up, like, Burj Khalifa on Google, and you'll find out how tall this building is. It is friggin' huge. And Tom Cruise literally hung off the side of it with just like a safety cable on. The hell's wrong with this guy? Ving Rhames comes back and makes a cameo. Michelle Moynihan comes back and makes a cameo. Really, the biggest dynamic is these four on the cover here. Paula Patton, Simon Pegg, Tom Cruise, and Jeremy Renner. They are amazing together, and I wish they could have brought back Paula Patton in the sequels. I wish they could have, because she was great. She's wonderful. I really like her. I kind of miss her in some of the new ones, and it's just sort of like, but they did a good job. Don't get me wrong. And that's what I mean. The dynamics between all of the characters is perfect. And I love how they kept Jeremy Renner's character kind of a secret throughout the whole film, and then there's like this big reveal about 2/3 of the way through. And so it's really good. This one, 5 out of 5 every time. I don't care. I will pop this in and just watch it because it is that good. It is a wonderful, wonderful film, and I recommend anyone check it out, okay? So, yeah, just go see it, and then just leave a comment below and let me know what you thought, okay? Because this movie is really good. Alright, so, after that, as Tom Cruise is walking away at the end of Ghost Protocol, he hears this thing about the Syndicate. Now, this brings us back to the original Mission Impossible. In the original Mission Impossible, like in the James Bond series, in the original Mission Impossible, they had this sort of a rogue organization, if you will, that was called the Syndicate. And it was something that IMF fought against forever. Like, during the series, it was like their main antagonist. So it was kind of like with the James Bond series. In the original James Bond series, they had Spectre, right? The Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion. So, and until recently, because of some disputes, they weren't able to use Spectre. So they had to use a whole bunch of different things. And so now they're trying to kind of connect them all together. We'll see how that works in Bond 25. So the whole point of this is that, so as he's walking out, you hear them say, you know, there's this shadowy organization, you know, called the Syndicate, and blah 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 blah, and so then, Ethan Hunt, in the beginning of the next film, is actually fighting against the Syndicate, and it's actually really good the way that they did it, because it's not over yet. Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation. This is an excellent film as well. In fact, this is probably my second favorite, if not third favorite, if Mission Impossible 2 is right up there, um, film in the series. Because it brings in, again, Tom Cruise fighting kind of on his own, almost like Ghost Protocol, where he's kind of fighting on his own. Now, the thing is that there was a guy named Ralph McQuarrie, and he was a artist for Industrial Light and Magic. Now, his son Christopher McQuarrie is the writer and director of the new Mission Impossible films, Rogue Nation and now Fallout. So what he's doing is he's bringing in these brand new characters. He's introducing new characters. He's retooling old characters and doing different things like that. So Jeremy Renner's back, and Simon Pegg is back, and let me see, what's her name? Rebecca Ferguson's in this one. Sean Harris, Alec Baldwin, and again, the stunts are over the top. Like this one has Ethan jumping into a liquid-cooled array to change out a couple of profile pictures for Simon Pegg's character. I mean, it's different. It's definitely one of those kind of you're not sure exactly what's going on kind of movies, but done in a good way. Not the original Mission Impossible, like I have to watch it 5 or 6 times to get it. You get it on the first time, but they keep things sufficiently mysterious that you're kind of like, wait a minute, are they or aren't they? So in this film, Sean Harris plays the villain, and he's a British national who kind of has gone rogue, and he's created this syndicate, and he's after this ledger. Okay, I don't want to spoil it for you, because if you haven't seen it, you really need to watch this film. It's really good, and it connects to Fallout, which is the next review I'm going to do. So, in this one, Rebecca Ferguson's character is sent into the syndicate by MI6 to infiltrate and try to figure out what's been going on. Now, in the beginning of this film, Ethan Hunt is kind of tracking down the syndicate, and the IMF again gets dissolved and folded into the CIA. And so Benji starts working as an analyst, and Brandt is kind of Alec Baldwin's right-hand man, and and Ving Rhames is kind of off on his own, and so it's one of those movies where they've brought in a lot of old characters. They brought in a lot of old jokes, a lot of old things from past Mission Impossibles. Where, like, there's one part where he says, where Alec Baldwin's character, who he's director Hunley, he says, well, back in my earliest days of the CIA, the IMF actually broke in, stole the inoculist, and tried to sell it. Hinting, directly referencing the first film in the series. I mean, it's like, and then they reference the last film in the series, Ghost Protocol, and so it's really nice to see that the writers are really paying attention to the characters, to the events of the story, to what has happened before, so that we get a sense of, here's this franchise that's been going for 20 years now, and there's 6 films now with Fallout, and they've done a very good job at kind of continuing the story and kind of bringing new characters in and kind of, showing you different things. And so it really kind of makes it that much better. And Rebecca Ferguson is wonderful in this movie. She really kind of plays this double agent. I mean, like, literally. And, I mean, you're just like, which side is she on? Like, seriously, man. But there's a lot of, like, really good, well-choreographed fight scenes. There's a lot of really good action. And, like I said, the stunts are just over the top. And so it's one of those things where I would recommend this to everyone. Like, again, watch Ghost Protocol and then go watch Rogue Nation, and you will be like, holy crap. So if you've seen the previews for Fallout, you will know that Sean Harris comes back in Fallout. So we're not done with this character yet, the villain that's in this movie, okay? We're not done with him yet. So, this one, again, 5 out of 5. Just awesome movie, okay? Like, you know, I mean, this is one of the things that you're going to find with me is when I review a movie, it's going to get probably anywhere between a 3 and a 5 because I don't like crap. If it doesn't entertain me, I'm not going to watch it, okay? So, again, there's my Mission Impossible retrospective. This is just sort of me kind of just sitting here rambling about my feelings on the Mission Impossible franchise. So leave a like, comment, tell me what you think about the Mission Impossible franchise. Is it dying? Do they need to, you know, kind of retire Tom Cruise and get someone else in there? What do you think? Just let me know in the comments below, and, you know, we'll just kind of see what happens in Mission Impossible Fallout. So I'll have a review on that in the next couple of days, and in the meantime, stay safe and watch some films. This is Russ for Russ's Movie Corner, signing off.